Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to start class now, and we are continuing our lesson about the Progressive Era. Yes, last time we met for class, we were learning about the first president of the Progressive Era that was progressive. That's Teddy Roosevelt, okay? Like we talked about before, Teddy Roosevelt had a very energetic personality. He was willing to tackle any problem, anything that got in his way. And Teddy Roosevelt, when he became president, his goal was to offer a square deal to the American people, a fair deal, and to make things fair. Teddy Roosevelt was a friend to workers, and he was an enemy of trusts and monopolies that took advantage of the American people, okay? Teddy Roosevelt, when he first became president, he took down large corporate monopolies and trusts like the Northern Securities Railroad Company, like J.P. Morgan. He took on people like John D. Rockefeller, and he was willing to take down any monopoly that he felt took advantage of people. There were some monopolies that he did not go after, but those were the ones that he felt were harmless, okay? And so Teddy Roosevelt would distinguish between trusts that happened where they were still fair, they still, did fair prices for the American people, and those trusts that were trying to reduce competition so that they could exploit the American people, okay? There was a coal mining company that had been very, very cruel to their workers, and the United Mine Workers, they had started a strike. And this was really dangerous for the country because the country ran on coal. At this point, a large portion of the country relies on electricity. Most of the country relies on railroads, and both those things relied on coal to create power, okay? This coal miners' strike threatened to disrupt the entire economy of the whole country. And so Teddy Roosevelt offered for both the leaders of the labor union and the leaders of the coal company, George Barrett, to come to the White House and negotiate a settlement. Now, the leader of that coal company, George Barrett, refused to go. He's like, I'm not going to go to the White House and talk to these labor unions. Who does he think he is, Teddy Roosevelt? And that's because most presidents before Teddy Roosevelt were afraid to take on big business. They relied on big business for campaign donations, and Congress was in the pocket of big business. And there was so much corruption, and the president had been so weak historically that no one had the guts to talk down to big business. And so George Barrett, he didn't think that he had to go to the White House when he was invited. Now, I told you a little bit about Teddy Roosevelt. What do you think his reaction was when George Barrett refused to come to the White House? He was not happy. He basically called the National Guard, and he said, you're going to go, you're going to take over this coal mine, you're going to arrest George Barrett, whatever, you're going to get those coal miners back to work, and you're going to give them a fair deal. If George Barrett doesn't want to come talk to me, then I'll go get him. And while the army is mobilizing, one of the big business people that Teddy Roosevelt had already messed with, J.P. Morgan, gives old George Barrett a call on the phone and said, listen, you idiot, Teddy Roosevelt is serious, okay? You better get your hiney down there to the White House and be nice, or else you're going to get your butt taken down. Now, I didn't say that verbatim, okay? But that's kind of the essence of that phone call. But George Barrett, he swallows his pride, he puts his tail between his legs, and he goes down to the White House like a good little boy, and they negotiate a settlement between the coal miners and the owners of the coal mine, okay? And that was kind of Teddy Roosevelt's attitude. He was always fighting for the little guy because the big bullies of big business, they had plenty of people on their side. Someone needed to take the side of the little guy. Teddy Roosevelt is the president that pushes through Congress the Pure Food and Drug Act that we talked about when we talked about Upton Sinclair in the jungle. Regulating meat packing plants, regulating food, regulating medicine. And Teddy Roosevelt did that to protect the consumer, the average ordinary American that needed an advocate, okay? Teddy Roosevelt didn't like bullies. He was going to be the bully that bullied the bullies, okay? And he called his presidency, often he referred to it as the bully pulpit, because sometimes he didn't have the legal authority to do things, but he would use his office as the president to make a big ruckus and shame people into doing what was right, okay? Basically, Teddy Roosevelt used the powers of the presidency that other presidents before him had been afraid to use to actually get rid of monopolies, to help out labor unions, take down the trusts, and make our economy safer and better for the average consumer. There's a lot of things that Teddy Roosevelt did. We don't have time to talk about all of them, but one thing that Teddy Roosevelt is especially known for is his efforts in conservation. Teddy Roosevelt was an avid hunter. He loved the outdoors, he loved spending time in nature, and he was a big fan of hunting and, outdoor sports. If you want to know who has done more to help save the environment than any other group, it's probably hunters. Hunters and hunting associations donate more money to protect the environment than PETA ever has, okay? Right? They do more to protect the environment because they enjoy the outdoors, they enjoy hunting. If they just destroy the environment, they can't hunt anymore, okay? Teddy Roosevelt used a law that already existed before he was president that gave him the power to declare public land national parks and national monuments, okay? The United States government still owned a lot of public land. One of the ways that the United States government would make money was selling public land to people and businesses, so that way, they could get a profit. But Teddy Roosevelt stopped selling as much public land to businesses for deforestation and mining, and instead, he started declaring certain parts of our country to be national parks. I have a nice map over here, and it has a lot these. They'll have green little outlines for national parks and national monuments, and those are areas of land that are reserved and protected from industrial use. Okay, Teddy Roosevelt did a lot to conserve the natural environment and protect our wildlife and our plant life in America. He did probably more than any other president had before him, and his example set forth other presidents to also preserve national monuments and national parks, okay? Right? You've probably been to several national parks that Teddy Roosevelt helped set up, okay? And if you look at you can look at the different national parks and you can see some of them are set up later, but a lot of the big famous national parks in America get their start during Teddy Roosevelt's presidency. This is also where Teddy Roosevelt makes an impact on popular culture, okay? You've probably heard of teddy bears, right? They're named after Teddy Roosevelt. Let me explain. So Teddy Roosevelt, when he wanted to go on a vacation, he didn't go to the beach. Okay, well, he might have went to the beach, but what he really liked to do was go hunting. Okay, so one day, whenever Teddy Roosevelt went on a little presidential vacation, he went on a hunting trip. That's the kind of vacations he had. This is the guy. He never relaxes. It's like, you know what? I'll take a break by go climbing mountains and sleeping outside in tents and shooting things. Okay, that's how he relaxes. That he blows off some steam. Okay, but anyways, he went on a bear hunt and they could not find any bear. Okay, it was like a disaster hunt for several days. They hunted for bears. They couldn't find any bears. But then one of the guides on the hunting trip managed to trap a little tiny baby bear. Okay, it wasn't a little baby bear cub, but it was a young bear. It wasn't a big grizzly bear or whatever. And they tied it to a tree for the president to shoot. They're like, President, we caught a bear. Okay, you can finish him off. And Teddy Roosevelt's like, I'm not going to shoot this bear that you tied up to the tree. That's not hunting. It's just shooting. That's not sporting. Okay, that's you got to find the animal out in the wild. Have some risk or whatever. So Teddy Roosevelt refused to do it, so they let the bear go. And anyways, when reporters wrote about it in the newspapers, people loved it. They're like, he saved a baby bear. He's so nice. And there was a toy maker who saw that this was popular in the newspaper. He started selling stuffed bears and called them teddy bears. And the name stuck. That's where teddy bears come from. Teddy bears are named after Teddy Roosevelt. Yes, they are.
Oh wait, no.
Yeah,
Her
Theodore-
dog's name.
My
Dog's
dog
name's
is
Teddy.
Oh, it's named after Teddy Roosevelt.
He's named after a
Yeah.
teddy bear because he looks like a teddy bear, but now he's named after Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. There you go. Theodore Roosevelt, short name for it is Teddy. There you go. Teddy Roosevelt. All right. So Teddy Roosevelt was president from around 1901 to 1909. And after mostly two terms as president, he decides he wants to retire. Teddy Roosevelt has been fighting Congress for years, and he's ready for a vacation. So he goes on a long vacation for 4 years. He tours the world. He goes hunting in Africa, shoots lions, bears, tigers, bears, oh my. He goes on this big long hunting trip, okay? And he leaves behind his close political ally and friend, William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft is a Republican. Teddy Roosevelt endorses him to run for president, and William Howard Taft wins. Taft is president for 4 years. And Taft is somewhat progressive, okay? If you just look at the numbers, Taft dissolved more monopolies and trusts than Teddy Roosevelt did. Now, Teddy Roosevelt got the ball rolling. He was the first one to start really taking down monopolies and trusts. But by the time Taft is in charge, the machine is going forward. He actually gets rid of more monopolies and trusts than Teddy Roosevelt, okay? And he does some progressive things, okay? He supports different initiatives like the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment is the amendment to the U.S. Constitution that gives Congress the power to collect income taxes, okay? How do you remember that the 16th Amendment gives Congress the power to collect income taxes? Well, when you're 16 years old, what can you go do? Get a job. Okay? And when you get a job, what do you start paying? Taxes. So when you're 16 years old, you can go to McDonald's, get a job, you can go to Woods and get a job, you can go to Whataburger, get a job, whatever, and you can pay your taxes. And when you're 16, you pay your taxes. The 16th Amendment is what gave the government the power to collect income tax. This was actually a progressive reform because before the progressive income tax, the primary way the government collected taxes was through tariffs. And tariffs were taxes on imported goods. When you tax imported goods, that cost is passed off to the consumers, the people buying those goods. Those people buying those goods, it's expensive for them to have to pay the cost of the tariff. But an income tax can be progressive. A progressive income tax taxes people at higher rates with higher incomes. So people who make a lot of money pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than people who pay very little money. This gave the government the money to fund all of these new programs and reforms of the progressive era. When you start inspecting meat packing plants, you've got to pay the inspectors. When you start regulating construction companies to make sure that they build buildings safely without fire hazards, you got to pay the building inspectors. This money comes from taxes, okay? That's how it works. Yes, you may. Now, William Howard Taft did some progressive things, but he also did some conservative things, okay? He actually ends up supporting the income tax, but he also supports high tariffs, something that progressives did not like. He supports some high tariffs. He also appointed people to be in charge of the natural environment in the United States to the Secretary of the Interior. He appointed big businessmen to be in charge of like our national parks, which upset Teddy Roosevelt, to say the least. Now, the reason why Taft did this is because Taft was a Republican and he had to keep the Republican Party happy. The Republican Party was not entirely progressive. There was the progressive wing of the Republican Party that loved Teddy Roosevelt, but then there was the conservative wing that did not like Teddy Roosevelt. Taft tried to make both sides happy. And when you try to make two different groups of people happy, you usually end up making both of them mad. because he wasn't quite conservative enough for the conservatives, and he wasn't progressive enough for the progressives, especially Teddy Roosevelt. Okay? Teddy Roosevelt, when he gets done with his vacation, realizes that William Howard Taft, his old buddy, had betrayed him in many ways. William Howard Taft was not progressive enough for Teddy Roosevelt's liking, and so Teddy Roosevelt decides to run for president again in 1912. Now, William Howard Taft, he runs for president in 1912 too. And the Republican Party picks Taft over Roosevelt. In the convention, when they're nominating the president, Roosevelt loses to Taft for the Republican Party. Now, normally, people who lose their party's nomination, they say, okay, I lost, but I'm going to support the Republican because I'm a Republican, or I'm going to support the Democrat because I'm a Democrat because I want my party to win. That's not what Teddy Roosevelt did, okay? Teddy Roosevelt's like, fine, if I can't be in charge of the Republican Party, I'm going to start my own political party. And so he did. So, when Teddy Roosevelt was upset with William Howard Taft, he ran for president against Taft. When Teddy Roosevelt couldn't win the Republican nomination, he just decided to start his own political party called the Progressive Republican Party. And the progressives from the Republican Party broke off from the conservatives in the Republican Party, and there were three parties running for president in 1912. Now, Teddy Roosevelt was getting a little older at that point, and some people asked him if he felt fit enough to be president. And Teddy Roosevelt's response was classic Teddy Roosevelt. He said, I feel as fit as a bull moose. Okay? And so his political party became known as the Bull Moose Party. Now, bull moose is not like a cow bull and a moose combined. It's just like a male moose, okay? Big, tough, mean moose. That's his idea. And so the Bull Moose Party, or the Progressive Republican Party, is a progressive dream on their agenda. They want things like federal regulated working hours. They want an end to 60-hour work weeks. They want a federally mandated work week with overtime pay. They want workers' compensation. They support reforms in the workplace and outlawing monopolies. They support reform in our banking system. Basically, all the progressive dreams Teddy Roosevelt supports. Teddy Roosevelt's plan is to get progressive Democrats to leave the Democratic Party and join with progressive Republicans in the Progressive Party, and they will be able to win. And this is what we call a third party. A third party is a new political party or a different political party other than the main two that offers a different choice. If you remember, the Republican Party itself started out as a third party between the Whigs and the Democrats, okay? So it's not unheard of for a third party to have success. And Teddy Roosevelt is the closest third party candidate ever to winning an election. He got close, but he did not win because the Republican Party was totally divided. And when the Republican Party is divided in half, who does that make it easy to win? The Democrats. And the Democrats win the 1912 election by a landslide. For some reason, they make the colors backwards on this map. Usually Democrats are blue, Republicans are red. But in this map, the Republicans are red. Now, in our electoral college, you get winner take all in most states. So if you win 50.1% of the vote in Texas, you get all the electoral college votes. That actually makes it possible for someone to win the presidency but lose the popular vote. That's not really exactly what happened here, but it's similar. So the green states were the progressive states. They voted for Teddy Roosevelt. The blue states voted Republican for Taft, and the red states voted for Wilson, who was Democrat. But if you look at the actual percentage of the popular vote, Roosevelt got 27.5, Taft got 23, Wilson got 42. So if you put the two Republicans together, they would have been able to defeat the Democrats. Okay? But because they were split, the Democratic Party won, and their winner was Woodrow Wilson. But don't worry, you progressives that are watching. Okay? Woodrow Wilson is a progressive. Okay? Woodrow Wilson is a progressive Democrat. You see, you don't have to be a Republican to be a progressive or a Democrat to be a progressive, and you don't have to be a Republican to be conservative. There were conservative Democrats, there were conservative Republicans, and there were progressive Republicans, and there were progressive Democrats. But Woodrow Wilson, as a progressive Democrat, kept the progressives leaving his party. See, Teddy Roosevelt's plan was to get the progressive Democrats to join in. But because Wilson was progressive, they stayed home, and the conservative Democrats voted Democrat, and they were able to win. Okay? Now, Woodrow Wilson is very progressive as well. Okay? He does a lot of the things that Teddy Roosevelt wanted to do. Okay? Woodrow Wilson is the president. As president, we need to talk about his personality a little bit. He was a college professor before he was president. And so, whereas Teddy Roosevelt, remember, he was like the cowboy, rancher, police officer, like soldier, tough guy. I'm going to blow stuff up and bash my way through problems. Woodrow Wilson is a professor. He's more thoughtful. He comes up with an intricate plan. He studies a problem, he comes up with a solution, he creates a plan, he presents the plan. That's kind of his style, okay? Very different from Roosevelt. Now, they actually agreed on a lot of things. They weren't that far away from each other politically because we have a progressive Republican, a progressive Democrat. But he has a whole different approach, okay? Now, don't feel too bad for William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft kind of hated being president, okay? He was an introvert. He hated all the pressure of the presidency and the schedule, and he was a stress eater. And when William Howard Taft was president, he held the record, and he still holds the record, as our fattest president we've ever had, okay?
That's sad.
It is sad. He also is the president who installed the first bathtub in the White House. Okay, like a permanent bathtub. You see, before indoor plumbing, you would have bathtubs, but you'd have to like pour buckets of water in the bathtub and then take a bath and then dump water out. You know, Taft like had plumbing where you unplug it and have a faucet. Anyways, but Taft installed the bathtub. He also was the first president to like throw a pitch at a baseball game, I believe. He loved baseball. Like Taft loved baseball. He's, I think, partially responsible. Taft is partially responsible for like the seventh inning stretch tradition. Anyway, but Taft, he loved baseball. He threw baseballs at, open baseball games, etc. But after Taft was done being president, later on, he was nominated to the Supreme Court, and he became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Taft is the only president who was also the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So he held the two of the highest offices in our country. He loved being a Supreme Court justice. He hated being president. He loved being Supreme Court justice. He was a lot healthier. He enjoyed that job more. He had a better time. So his life turned out better, okay? So don't feel too bad for him, okay? Now, Woodrow Wilson, he comes into the presidency and he promises something called the New Freedom. He wants people to be free from the problems that had been plaguing America during the Gilded Age. And he attacks in 3 different directions. You know how like in an essay, a professor wants you to have 3 good points to back up your thesis, okay? Woodrow Wilson kind of does this with the presidency. He's got 3 big problems that he tackles to try to end the oppression of, privilege over Americans to help out the regular, ordinary people. The first of which is directed toward the banking system. You see, ever since our old boy, Andrew Jackson, okay, America's banking system had kind of been wonky, okay? Alexander Hamilton, back during the the early republic, established the banking and finance system of the United States while George Washington was president. That lasted for a while until Andrew Jackson, who believed that a national bank was unconstitutional. And if you look in the Constitution, there are no words that say a national bank can exist. It's one of those things where it's kind of implied but not explicitly stated. So Andrew Jackson, if you remember, he fought a war with the national bank and took all the US money out of it, rejected their charter, etc. And ever since then, we kind of had a bank, kind of not had a bank. But from Andrew Jackson on to Woodrow Wilson, there's been very little regulation of the banks. There's no rules on how the bank should operate. There's no rules on how much money banks can loan out. And there's really not a standard banking thing. There's no one in charge of the banks. All the banks are just kind of doing their own thing, okay? And so this allows for some people to take advantage of the system. The big banks really, they just care about big business and they don't really treat ordinary people better. Think about the plight of the farmers who were always getting messed over by the banks because the banks would offer really generous terms to big business, but farmers would have to pay really high interest rates and they would get into debt and then their farms would get repossessed, okay? Someone needs to come in and start straightening the banks out, and that's the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a national bank. It is a bank for banks. Banks borrow money from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve controls the money supply of the United States, okay? Today, the Federal Reserve has things like 12 banks across the country that then they service all the banks across the whole country. And they not only bank for us, but other countries bank with us in our Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is in charge of our money supply. You'll notice, look here at the top of this dollar bill. What does it say? Federal Reserve note. Your dollars are technically checks from the Federal Reserve Bank. That's how they work, okay? This dollar represents a sum of money in the Federal Reserve Bank, and we're just passing back and forth the checks. That's what we're doing. So the Federal Reserve is created by Woodrow Wilson. It is something that was created to help regulate our money supply. It is technically not in the Constitution, but it's one of those implied powers of the Constitution. Okay. Now, the next thing he works at is the Federal Trade Commission. You see, there's a lot of businesses that are being really sneaky and they're doing things that are really bad for consumers. But there's a constitutional problem that prevents the government, and it prevented a lot of people in the government from doing anything about it. And that's the 10th Amendment, okay? The 10th Amendment says that states or people keep all rights not given to the government by the Constitution. Your government is limited to what the Constitution says it can do. So, it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing that meat packing plants in Chicago are throwing rats in the taco meat. But can the government do anything about it? Is that not the business of the state of Illinois? Illinois, they need to pass a law stopping them from throwing rats in the hamburgers. But can the federal government really do anything about it? Well, we're going to look in our Constitution, okay? There is an answer. It's in Article 1. Section 8. Section 8 of Article 1 shows us what the Congress has the power to do. Oh man, I gotta find it. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, impose excises, pay the debts, provide regulated commerce, to coin money, regulated value, provide for a navy, to provide for It's called the Interstate Commerce Clause. I'm gonna find it. We'll find the exact line for you. So there's a necessary and proper clause. Oh man, I'm just reading right over. You ever look at like a piece of text and you're just like, you read so much times and you just, it's in here. This is why they had so many arguments about the Constitution. You had to find stuff in it. But Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce. Okay? They have the power to regulate interstate commerce, and they have the power to make all laws necessary and proper into carrying the execution of the foregoing powers. Okay? This is often called the elastic clause of the Constitution. And the Interstate Commerce Clause, the power to regulate interstate commerce, gives Congress the ability to regulate businesses if they do business in more than one state. Now, that means if that hamburger meat in Chicago is going anywhere outside of Illinois, the government can regulate it. That make sense? If you have a lemonade stand on the corner of a street in Como, it is still technically interstate commerce, because unless you only cater to people from Texas, and you can guarantee that they're only from Texas, and then you can guarantee that your lemons and your sugar and your water and everything you use to make your lemonade comes only from Texas, it's interstate commerce. So Congress has the authority to regulate, okay? The Federal Trade Commission is a government watchdog that oversees a lot of interstate commerce, including big trade deals and companies merging and buying and selling. The Federal Trade Commission is a watchdog for the economy. It's like a policeman for the economy. And they watch when companies start to get close to being a monopoly. When they start to get close to interfering with competition, the FTC can come in and say, no, stop that, okay? The Federal Trade, it happens like, probably the most recent one is like when there were a couple cell phone companies that were trying to merge, I forget. So like AT&T, they merged, or they were going to try to merge with Sprint. There was one of them that was trying to merge with Sprint. T-Mobile, okay? And the FTC has to approve it or disapprove it, because they were getting to the point where we're only going to have like 2 or 3 companies that offered cell phone service, which is basically a trust and a monopoly. You want options. That way, if one company starts to charge too much money, you can go to the other company that's cheaper. But if there's only one cell phone company in all of America, they can charge as high rates as they want, and you're going to pay it. Okay? So the FTC has actually declined certain companies from merging because that would decrease competition and hurt the consumer. So the FTC is designed to protect the consumer and to regulate interstate commerce, okay? And finally, we have the Clayton Antitrust Act. Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, they utilized the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was from the 1880s. It was not strong enough to get rid of all monopolies everywhere. It only gave the president the authority to get rid of monopolies like one at a time. Like, this monopoly is bad, we can get rid of it one at a time. The Clayton Antitrust Act gets rid of basically every major monopoly in America. All the big monopolies and trusts are broken up into smaller companies. So Teddy Roosevelt started the fight against monopolies and trusts. Taft continued it. Woodrow Wilson pretty well finished it, okay? And so these 3 presidents, they're all considered to be progressive presidents. Is during Woodrow Wilson's presidency that the last 2, the 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendments really go through. The 16th Amendment of the Progressive Era is the Income Tax Amendment. Remember, when you're 16 years old, you get to pay taxes. The 17th Amendment gave people the power to elect their senators directly instead of indirectly, okay? Before the 17th Amendment, the individual state legislatures would pick their senators. So you wouldn't get to vote for the senator of Texas, Ted Cruz, or John Cornyn. Instead, the legislature in Austin would pick 2 senators from each state. The 17th Amendment made it so that people got to vote for their senators. It made the government more responsive to the people. How do you remember the 17th Amendment gave people the ability to directly elect their senators? What does the word 17 start with? What's the first two letters of 17?
Sin.
S-E. What's the first two letters of senator? S-E. That's what I got for you. So Senator 17, okay? The 18th Amendment, so there are 4 progressive amendments in our Constitution. 16, 17, 18, and 19. 16th Amendment gave Congress the power to collect income taxes. 17th Amendment gave people the power to elect senators. The 18th Amendment, we talked about it already, is the Prohibition Amendment, the Temperance Amendment that led to the prohibition of alcohol being made, sold, or transported in the United States. When you're 18 years old, you can't buy alcohol. You can vote. How old do you have to be able to buy alcohol? 21. The 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment. Okay? And the 19th Amendment, we talked about that earlier this week or last week, is the last progressive era amendment. That's the one that gave women the right to vote in 1920. I don't have a trick for that one. You just got to memorize that one. 19 women in 1920 got to vote 19 times. They got to vote, okay? Women get to vote. That's that one, okay? So with that, we're going to move on to what these presidents were doing with the rest of the world, okay? So we got this.
That's it?
Well, we got another slide. We're going to go on. We got to keep rolling.
What's in that slide?
Yes, it's called, oh man, it's weird. It's called World War I. I forget what I called this. The political system at strain at home and abroad or something like that. Nope. It's called, I forget what it's titled. What's the title of the next chapter? Under strain at home and abroad. For some reason, okay, so again, this next chapter in our textbook is another example of my continued fight with whoever came up with the chapter titles of this. Oh, and it's not even this one, it's another one. It's called The United States and the Collapse of the Old Order. Okay, it's like they don't make sense. They don't make sense. This chapter we're about to do is World War I and imperialism. Okay, but they've written it in like a wonky way. Okay, the collapse. The United States and the collapse of the old world order. Like, who just, it's imperialism and World War I. It's World War I. If you really want to be creative, call it the Great War. Okay? Don't call it the United States and the collapse of the old world order. It's dumb. I don't like the chapter titles. I said it. It's on video. I stand by my statement. Okay? Right? It's not even clickbait. It's just confusing. This doesn't make me want to click on this chapter title. I'm like, what's going on? It's weird. Okay, because if your chapter titles are so vague that you mix them up, like, because the last one was like the political system at strain on home and abroad. I mean, that could apply to World War I too, I guess, because the political system was under strain. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. All right, so remember Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson and William Howard Taft? They were also presidents during an era of American imperial expansion. And we talked about that before, right? When we talked about the United States and the Spanish-American War and gaining Hawaii during William McKinley's presidency. Well, Teddy Roosevelt, he is an imperial president. While he's working on making things better at home for the United States in the progressive era, in our interactions with the rest of the world, Teddy Roosevelt is pushing American interests, even if it's at the expense of others, okay? What this means is the United States starts directly and indirectly influencing the governments of other countries. And what Roosevelt is really concerned with is North and South America. If you go back in time, back to last semester, remember our fifth president, James Monroe. James Monroe made something called the Monroe Doctrine, okay? The Monroe Doctrine was this statement that the United States would oppose any foreign interference in North and South America to preserve and protect the independence of all the countries in North and South America. Now, James Monroe made that promise when the United States was just a little bitty country, okay? Well, not little bitty. It was after the Louisiana Purchase, but we were not sea to shining sea, industrial revolution, super powerhouse that we were, okay? We were just a growing, young, scrappy country. And when we said that, Britain and France and Germany and Russia and Spain or whatever, they were like, oh, that's cute, okay? But now America's got our big book hands on, okay? We've got a big honking military. We took down Spain in the Spanish-American War. We showed the rest of the world that we knew what we were doing. We've got some big steel battleships with big guns. We've got a huge manufacturing economy thanks to the Industrial Revolution. And now we have the backing behind that phrase, the Monroe Doctrine, okay? Teddy Roosevelt, his philosophy when it came to foreign policy was speak softly and carry a big stick. Try to do things the nice way first. But if they don't want to do it nice, use your military if necessary. Teddy Roosevelt saw the United States grow something called an indirect empire, okay? Instead of directly controlling territory, like we do with, say, Hawaii and the Philippines, the United States started to more indirectly influence the politics and economies of other countries, where we get the benefits of empire, we get the benefits of having a market for our products and a place to get natural resources and a way to spread our culture, but without the drawbacks of like having to actually manage a country, okay? Because the Philippines, we were in the middle of a war with the Philippines trying to keep them under our control. And you don't want that just everywhere across the world. Some people called Teddy Roosevelt's style of diplomacy gunboat diplomacy, which is where you go and negotiate with someone with a giant gunboat outside in the harbor, which makes your negotiations a little more forceful, okay? You're not saying you're going to beat them up, but you've got your boxing gloves on. I'm not saying I'm going to shoot you, but I've got guns ready. Does that make sense? All right, that's kind of how he negotiated. And this is a way that he made things work. So what we're going to try to talk about tomorrow is how Teddy Roosevelt dug the Panama Canal. Now, he didn't dig it literally, but you would not have a Panama Canal the way we do without someone as tough as Teddy Roosevelt, okay? Remember, he's like a bulldog. He's going to blast right through the problem, okay? That's the kind of person you need to dig a canal through 50 miles of jungle and rock slides, mudslides, and malaria in a place where it rains 9 months out of the year. Okay, that just so you know. So we'll pick up there tomorrow. If you have any questions about the interview questions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, you guys have a good day. Do good things. Be good people.